And find it hard to disagree as usual with Deputy Fitzmaurice. Rock of sense. The words I don't hear coming from the opposition, curiously, are words like, crisis, emergency, urgency. And it's like, some of the deputies opposite arrived at a burst water main. We get all this theory about what ought to be done, about the materials that should be used, about the professionals that ought to be sought to carry out the repairs, the theory behind the best way to repair a water mains, and yet the water's bursting out of the pipe. And what Fianna Fáil government is trying to do is fix the pipe with the materials we have right now, and also legislate for best practice as the future begins to emerge. Now, I do have, and I know the Minister would share this, there have been train wrecks of PPPs, and the state needs to have learned from them. Some of them are too recent, not in relation to housing, but in relation to the school building projects. But that is not to say that there have been scores and hundreds of new school buildings constructed throughout the state to a very high standard and left in the hands of the state in very good shape to manage going forward. In relation to my own experience in my own county of South Dublin, we share with Deputy O'Brien, the biggest stop and break on the construction of social housing in my time as a councillor was the Minister's department before his time. I remember Alan Kelly was Minister for Housing when a particular project was announced in my area. He was Minister for Housing. Minister Coveney moved it forward, and it didn't get started until Minister Murphy came into office. 3 different housing ministers, because the plans had to go back and forth and back and forth. It had gone to a Part 8, it had been approved by councillors, and the department held it up. Builders built it quite efficiently, and there are people kind of living in it now. So, look, the state has got stung, and we have to be mindful of that, by PPPs over the years. But what the public aren't being told by those who are proposing, a public model is how long it would take to mobilise that perfect public building model. The Minister will know, and deputies will know too, that there's a real shortage of land. The local authorities haven't been investing in public land. So by the time they get their investment in public land, get that land zoned appropriately, get public consultation phases run through, we will be waiting years. Thankfully, there's a government in place now, heavily influenced by my own party, that's beginning to make impacts. I mean, if you take, for example, I am staggered last Count Corla, and I know deputies who are not from the capital, their mind probably is boggled by the rents that people pay here. Up to €2,500 in my own constituency, actually up to 3,000 in a couple of, they're not extravagant houses locally. Equally, I'm staggered by young constituents and the amount that they have saved in the last couple of years. I know a couple, and I mentioned it to Minister O'Brien, who moved home 2 years ago to save, and they were fortunate. And we often, and I would have advocated and called this out over the last 2 years about those young adults who've had to return home because they can't afford rents, or they've returned home because they want to save. And of course, what I've ignored, and it has been pointed out to me by people close to me that I know, is that, well, at least younger people living in Dublin can return to their family home and save, but that if you have people up from any different county in Ireland working in Dublin, they don't have that opportunity to return to their family home to save. But this young couple returned home to one of their sets of parents, and in 2 years saved €55,000. And until this piece of legislation that we're passing today came on the scene, I couldn't offer them any hope in terms of purchasing a home in their own constituency. Increasing the affordable piece of the Part 5, or reintroducing it again, holds out real hope to them. The state equity scheme, no, it's not perfect, Deputy O'Brien. I accept that, but there's a demand there now. It will be oversubscribed. I don't know how we'll deal with that. That's going to be a particular issue. These are not wealthy. This is not a wealthy couple. They have ordinary, great, run-of-the-mill, blue-collar jobs. But they saved really hard. They don't work in financial services. They're not medical consultants or financial consultants. As Charlie Haughey once said, there's no such person as an ordinary person. So they are extraordinary in their own way. And they put their mind to it. And until this piece of legislation, they had no housing option. The final point I want to make is this. Deputy Fitzmaurice is right about this involves a mix, but we need to keep an eye and we need to police it. The one thing the left never seem to have any regard for, with greatest respect to yourself, Lascian Corley, is the risk the entrepreneur takes. You know, I have a brother in the States who went over the typical kind of American dream story, and he would be typical of many business people here. Barely the seat in his trousers. Went through, you know, various different iterations of employment, and eventually got to do what he had dreamed of doing, which was property development. But one story he tells me has left a very deep impression with me, because he's been doing this now 20 years. So he's been employing the same group of dedicated, hard-working people on and off, not all of them, but some of them for that 20-year period. And he said to me, you know, they look at me and they expect me to keep them employed for another 20 years. And he said, that's pressure. That's huge pressure. So entrepreneurs take huge risks, and we talk about the profit piece, but what if it doesn't work? We never talk about that without enterprise, without the ability to take calculated risks, not reckless risks, and there have been people, we know it, a decade ago, who were reckless, and they had banks who were even more reckless. But the entrepreneur starts off with a spirit of enterprise. I want to do this. I have the skills, I think, to make it happen. I'm prepared to take calculated risks to make it happen, and I could fail. And if I fail, I'm the only one who will face the consequences here. And the people who believed in me, I would have to lay them off. But the responsible entrepreneur wants to keep them going. That's a colossal responsibility for one man or for one woman to keep someone employed for their entire life, gainfully employed and productively employed. I've never witnessed a local authority build public housing in my time when I was a councillor since 1999. All the local authority projects in my own county were built in partnership with contracting companies, built to the highest standard, and have created lovely, secure homes for families and their children. Yes, I'd love the ideal to get there where we build public housing on public land. Don't favour a state construction company, didn't favour Irish Water. I've come around to it in terms of the fact that it's taken over from 42 local authorities, but I would have issues with the way it delivers as well, and in terms of its efficiency, certainly in dealing with it on a face-to-face basis. We don't have, and I come back to it again, people on the other side of this house keep looking for the perfect. We're trying to deal with the immediate, and dealing with the immediate requires solutions that work and deliver. They need to be policed. I know the Minister knows that, and that the experiences of previous PPPs, that we need to take those on board to ensure that they don't happen, and to ensure that our local authorities and our state agencies are equipped with people as bright as the private sector has to offer in its own realm. Thanks, Lascian Corley.